everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Andrew, and today, very special guest, one of my good friends, colleagues, mentors, and a good friend of mine. We've played Helldivers together, saved the world. We've done awesome, cool army shit together because we're both in the military. But Jason Scribner, and Jason, I'm gonna pass, also known as Scribs. But Jason, I'm gonna pass it to you for a quick little introduction and say a quick hi.
Thanks, Andrew. Like you said, my name is Jason Scribner. I have been in the cybersecurity world for about 10 years now. And just as Andrew has stated, I also serve in the military. I do this on the military side as well. Don't be uh, fooled by the beard. It's a temporary
It's
thing.
an illusion.
It's an illusion. But anyways, it's great to be on this channel. I know it's been a long time coming, and luckily, I do want to talk about something that's coming up. But first, my history is I was able to start cybersecurity. I wouldn't say effectively easy, but the road has kind of been laid out for me because I was able to jump on those opportunities that came my way. I started with no background. I didn't even have a high school diploma. I had to get my GED to join the military. The military, I did some combats. Luckily, I had a thing for technology, and my NCO at the time recognized that and said, "Hey, you need to get out of combat and go to something else, IT or technology."
Yep.
So I switched over to that for a while. Felt like I was pretty good on it on IT, and then got sick and tired of fixing the commander's printer over and over again. Usually because of bad ink or the paper jam or whatever. And luckily, a warrant officer, an old mentor of mine, convinced me to look more into cybersecurity and intelligence. And I dazzled in that a little bit and became more solidified in cybersecurity, specifically on the Bloom team side, because we need a lot of it. And now today, my official title is I am an incident response and threat analyst for a particular fintech company. And my job relies on providing proof of concepts, reporting, metrics, and possible logging data that could affect the company as a whole. So my job and my role is pretty demanding, but not every job is like that. I like my job because specifically it allows me to play around with these proof of concepts. It allows me to actually do hands-on training and knowledge. And then because I have been in it for about 10 years, I am now also at the mentor status. I mentor younger and up to upcoming people for cyber. So
This ginger. So
I feel like you're pretty far up there. I don't know how much more I can train you on that, but yeah. So speaking of printers, we do have
I
a
was just about to
possible.
say that was an excellent example of being frustrated with your commander's printers because today we're actually going to be talking, if I'm not mistaken from us talking a little bit before the show started, on kind of the exploit or kind of research that you kind of gotten to do here in the last few weeks on kind of an open source. It's already a known exploit that's kind of out and about, but wanted to kind of discuss with our listeners and everything, kind of maybe a thought process or a walkthrough, as we kind of also ask some additional questions as always, about finding exploits within the environment. How do you document those? How do you do in that hunt process? Once you find those, like what and how do remediation steps look like? And with that, Jason, I will kind of pass it to you to, if you want, we can start sharing screen, or we can still talk a little bit more on kind of what we'll be talking about today.
I'm a big hands-on person. I like showing, not just talking. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here. I have a nice little Kali box to show everybody. So let me go ahead and share that. And just let me know when it pops up.
I see it. Millions of brother printers hit by
Oh,
critical, unpatchable bug.
one of
Oh
my
no.
favorite things of research is when it comes across these titles and headlines. One of the things I always try to teach people, especially in military intelligence and cybersecurity, is never rely on the headline. Always read the actual article. But with my company, guess what the senior people rely on is the headline. So typically what happens, especially in our day-to-day scenarios, is we have threat hunts and threat requests and requests for information, or RFIs as we call them in the military, especially when stuff like this hits the news, because not just cyber folk are paying attention to cyber. You have your C-suite, your CTO, your CFO, even your CEO will sometimes pay attention to the news when this happens, and they'll see these articles, and the first thing they will do is open up a ticket for us, and my counterpart CTI, which is our cyber threat intelligence, they will receive this. They'll do their initial investigation, and then they will cut a ticket towards us, the incident response guys, to determine whether or not this would actually affect the company. So typically what happens is I get passed down this information, and I get some links to these articles, and I like dark reading. Dark reading is a pretty good aggregator of news for cyber related stuff. So I highly recommend it. But I also highly recommend, when you go through these, as first stated before, is this headline says millions of others hit by a critical unpatchable bug. The first thing a lot of people are going to do is panic, right? It's like, oh my God, it's an unpatchable bug. But we really need to, as a incident response and threat analyst, like, you really need to utilize that analyst part. Like, you actually need to, control the hype, so to speak, the vibe that's going on, and actually really read it. And it does take time. I mean, you need to kind of go through it. You need to read down here. This, says that Rapid7, and if for most people who are not aware, Rapid7 is a developer of Metasploit. So it's a free tool that you can download and utilize, and it's even embedded in Kali Linux, and we'll show kind of how that works here in a second. They were able to do some investigations for roughly about a year to 2 years, and do zero day exploit research with Brother. So Brother allowed this, so that way they can find their own vulnerabilities. And then once they figure out what these vulnerabilities are, what mitigations they could do, then they'll publish it to the public. Now, the reason why this one's kind of a big up and coming one as of this month in June 2025 is because it had a CVE score, or CVSS score, of 9.8, which is pretty critical, right? So a lot of times when anything's 9.5 or above, a lot of companies want to patch this immediately. But if you read down here a little bit, down here, it says it can generate the default administrator password with this security researcher, Stephen Fewer, who works for Rapid7. The issue is that if we actually go ahead and click on this blog post, which I have over here, the main thing that people are going to read is, it's going to say right here, as indicated, this vulnerability cannot be remediated in firmware and has required a change in the manufacturing process. That means that any printers that are out there that are affected by this, they cannot be patched.
Oh no.
That sounds bells and whistles in everybody's mind. So that's a huge problem, right? So we can read into this, and I highly recommend, when it comes to incident response and threat management, you want to read through the actual article. You want to see what they're doing. You can see that they discovered 8 new vulnerabilities, and they list them all right here. You want to see which one's the most important one, which obviously is the authentication bypass, which we will demonstrate here, because I have a lovely brother printer myself, that is actually affected by this. So as per proof of concept, instead of using the company's stuff, which takes red tape to get approved, so I can just do it through myself, and we'll show that here in an example. So you want to read through this, and actually, when you document this information, there's going to be a lot of questions that come out of it. You want to, the who, what, when, where, why, obviously, and then you also want to explain in as layman terms as much as possible, because even though your CTO, or even your CISO, if you have one, your CIO, your CEO, they might be tech savvy to a certain extent. What they want is the bottom line. How does this affect my company? How does this affect the security profile of the company, the atmosphere? What attack vector do we have? What does our surface layer look like when it comes to whether or not somebody can take advantage of this? And what do we need to do? Like, do we need to spend money to mitigate this? If you remember the 4 mitigation strategies, there's risk acceptance, reduction, mitigation, and transference, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as businesses, they had to make a decision to reduce the risk somehow, right? And typically, a lot of people will always look at, like, well, if they can't afford it, if they can't do anything, you just accept it,
We
right?
unplug all the
Um,
printers.
which is a possibility. I mean, that is something that you can think of, right? It's like, oh, well, maybe we won't use Brother printers at all, and we'll switch to HP. Hopefully, they don't have to worry about inkjet. That's a lot of ink that they'll have to pay for. But anyways, when it comes to that, you do want to fully research this. You want to document specific information. Like obviously, Rapid7 does a pretty good job, especially this blog post. He highlights, what needs to be the most important, right? 8 new vulnerabilities since they started looking into this as of June 2025. 748 models across 5 different vendors, right? So it's not just brother printers. There's also different vendors that are affected, right? You could
Yeah.
say the most serious is this, right? Brother has indicated this, and you can go through this. You can link all these, right? You can highlight the most important one, which is obviously this one, and then you can also go into impact, right? Why does this impact us? How does this impact us, right? And it goes into pretty in-depth knowledge. And this is not the point of the video, is to like look into a fully research paper, and obviously you don't want to
Yeah.
like
Yeah. This is our high. This is like, we'll call this like in a sense the high level of like, hey, look, this is, and this is the important part when it comes into whether you're doing critical response or doing IR response, or honestly just doing open source intelligence and like these RFIs, like just like you mentioned, CFOs, CISOs, leads, managers. If you're an MSSP, different clients might be reaching out to you saying, hey, is this something we should worry about? Some of the times, most of the time, it's just some Google dorking, going to some good known sources. So, like you said, Dark News, Rapid7, and doing the reading and the research. Say, okay, like, well, why is this important? Your 5 Ws: who, what, when, why, where. Like, okay, is this important? What's the level of it? What's the why behind it, or the so what? And then, like you just said, kind of doing that bluff of a quick overview of like, hey, here's the importance of it. It's a high critical vulnerability. This is the issue that it's having across these several models, or 748 some models, I think, across all these printers, and what can actually come out of it if these actually happen. So no,
right.
100%.
Yep. So we'll get into a little bit more in depth. So you do actually want to actually look at these CVEs. I know some people in my level of cybersecurity, it's hard to read the technical lingo because it's just kind of like a requirement. So when you click on these, you get into CVE records, like obviously CVE.org, which is a great database to have, right? And it can be pretty dry. But it is your job as an incident response and threat analyst to really describe exactly what's going on, right? So this title right here is authentication bypass by a default password generation affecting multiple models from brother industries, right? So this is a pretty good title to have, and you can state this in your research paper or in your investigation analysis for your ticket, or however your company handles this process. But there are going to be questions out of this, right? Especially a 9.8 vulnerability. If your company is very critical about security, they're going to be like, so what? What does this mean?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean authentication bypass, right? How do they bypass it, right? And this is where the meat and potatoes of this job comes into play, and where blue team kind of blends in a little bit with red team. Now, just to be upfront, just because you're able to take advantage of proof of concept doesn't mean you're a red teamer. It just means that you understand from a red team perspective of how an attacker would actually take advantage of this. And so you really want to like really read into this and then understand where this is coming from and how to do it, right? So if you come over to your CISO and say the reason why this is a problem is because they can utilize protocols HTTP, IPP, PJL, SNMP over this, right? That's a great way of describing the actual issues. Like, hey, look, an attacker can use these protocols on the local network and unauthenticated and get this information and generate the default password. They're like, okay, cool. And most of the time, when it comes to incident response and threat management, that's good enough, right? We don't really need a proof of concept. In my case, it was more of like, hey, we kind of actually need to see if this actually works, right? So in that case, I'm not. Luckily, I didn't have to record myself on any of this. This is where this YouTube video comes into play. It's more of just documenting the step-by-step procedure on how an attacker works.
Yep.
Luckily, with Rapid7, they do a pretty good job of making the stuff for us, so I don't have to do this from scratch, right?
And this is a huge shout out to one, Rapid7, and two, when it comes into cybersecurity, and I think we've mentioned it before, and I tell this to people all the time when they get in, like, I need to know how to code. I need to know what's going on. I'm like, you need to understand it. You need to understand how to read it, how to implement things, how to maybe run into a terminal. But half of the battle and half of what cybersecurity is just being curious and asking why and finding there's already a lot of these things that have been generated. Like, once again, this vulnerability is back from 2024. We're not talking about something that's brand new out of the box that's still being developed. If this is something that comes across, or maybe there's a CVE that's even back from 2022, 2024 in that time range, and then someone in your your chain of command asks about it, it's very likely the research has already been done. It's just finding what research fits best to your ask from your leadership. And if they do ask you to replicate it or to kind of show proof of concept, you can from scratch, like what Jason could have done, is from scratch written everything out. And if you already did that, or maybe you had to do that at work, or you do your research and you find, hey, look, it looks like Rapid7's already made a GitHub repository of what this would look like and the commands to do and how the CV is actually going to have this authentication bypass happen, and then just kind of follow along. And then boom, half your work has been done. And it's just by simply Google dorking and finding the right resources to pull.
Yep, exactly. I can't agree more on that, because when it comes to the cyber battle, knowing is half the battle, but the other half is knowing how to know. And the reason why I say that is because, like you said, Google dorking, you don't have to make the wheel. The wheel is most likely already created, and nobody should fret about, especially new coming into cyber. We need as many cyber people as possible. We are missing skilled personnel. The gap between the beginner and the advanced is being able to know who and what to rely on to get the right information at the right time. Myself am not a programmer. I am not a coder. I know Python just enough to make a bunch of Python modules to do what I needed to do, and that's about it. Like, I am not a software developer. I rely on specific cornerstones of the cyber community to provide that for me. Does that become a crutch a little bit? Possibly, right? But the world of cyber is, we're never going to miss that crutch, so to speak. Like, we're never going to have people who are not in software development like that, especially when it comes to nowadays. A lot of people are worried about AI taking our jobs, and I don't see that happening. I see AI becoming a great effective tool to kind of help us
Yeah.
develop our tool sets better.
Yep,
Yeah.
I'm very much on that same platform. I think that, and we could talk about AI probably for a whole another hour. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I won't
Yeah. It's a
deviate.
whole different
I
concept.
won't deviate too far. But so cool. So we have Rapid7. They have this GitHub repository. So I guess what are we looking at, Jason?
So let's start with kind of looking at the finalization of the report itself, right? In my case, if I didn't have to do a proof of concept, at this point, this link right here, where they added an auxiliary module in Metasploit, right? So there's already a module to the bleeding edge version of Metasploit as of June 2025. I don't need to do anything else. I can say, hey, look, there's an auxiliary module that can be ran. It will grab all the information for me, right? Generates the default password, and there's the proof of concept right there on paper, right? At this point, linking this and showing this information how the module works, you're done at that point, right?
And
This is all it really takes.
and just to super simplify it, so when Jason's saying module, so pretty much what that means is rather than Jason going in and actually opening up a Kali VM, logging into Metasploit, running through the commands, entering in maybe the printer and stuff that he's already having to pull for this, that example below inside that module, inside this snippet, is already showing the proof of concept, and the module they created is ideally the exploit that they've incorporated it into um, Metasploit, correct?
Yep.
So
Yeah. It's already in there. So this could be done. And as a security researcher, as a security intelligence analyst, this is good enough for mostly your research paper, as long as you know how to go back and reference it and understand the documents. It is your job as a security person, cybersecurity person, to actually really understand this and then translate it to layman's terms. I will admit that does take time to get used to. Does take some consideration and understanding how to translate it, which means that you can't just read HTTP like, oh, this is what HTTP is, and then translate it over, because if you don't actually understand what the protocol is, then you won't be able to explain it in layman's terms. So when you practice this, it's great to practice. Just always keep in your head that you need to be able to translate that into layman's terms, and that will come naturally as you have to explain this.
correct.
Um, but we're not done yet, because in my concept, they wanted a little bit more, right? So they're like, okay, cool. How does the module work? So let's start with doing a proof of concept, if you want to get into it. And we're going to start with the very basics of the cyber kill chain. And what is the very basic, Andrew?
It is your intelligence gathering or doing the reconnaissance, I believe.
Reconnaissance. So
Reconnaissance.
we're going to be doing some active enumeration on this printer that I have. So let's go ahead and minimize this real quick. Actually, I do already have it up. So let's look at the vulnerable printer that we have currently. So I have it assigned a random IP address right here on my local network, right? And as you can see, I have the little general status printer, right? And this is a home printer. An enterprise printer might look a little different, but we have a little login series, right? So
Oh, hold on, real quick. Everyone watching, this is a we don't promote hacking. This is a proof of concept. Jason is doing this as his own free will, and we are showing this to show proof of concept that what we found or what we're explaining on. I don't recommend you doing this to your house if you're a child trying to do this and hack your parents' printer or your dad's work. So just always remember before ever trying to do any type of thing, always make sure you have permission. Jason, please continue. Thank you. Quick safety announcement.
okay. I can also add a disclaimer that there is a mitigation for home printers. If you've already changed the default admin password, this will no longer work. So yes, please do not mess up your stuff. This is my printer. I have additional printers. I don't mind breaking my own stuff. This is my own proof of concepts. And this is just for, like Andrew said, educational purposes only. So now with brother printers, especially home printers, there is no username. It's usually just default admin. So if I wanted to log in, I have to put a password in. But since I don't know the password, it's locked out. From here on out, we can go into a little bit more in-depth enumeration, right? Enterprise passwords should, and I'm going to put this in quotation marks, should have most of these print pages locked out. For home printers, not so much, right? So if we go back into what this vulnerability is, right? An unauthenticated attacker can generate a device's default administrator password. What does that need, right? So if we look at the auxiliary module, right, we can see when the module is running, it's looking to leak something out, right? In this case, it's looking for the target serial number. So we're looking for the serial number of the printer, right? How do we get that? Well, let's see if one of these pages actually works without logging in. Oh no. Oh shoot. I have the serial number right
Oh my
there,
gosh, the
right?
maintenance information. Oh no.
Yeah. This is enumeration 101. Never forget the basics, right? Just playing around with, like, if you're enumerating something, it's like, oh, maybe you can do some like passive enumeration that's just going to give you information right off the bat. And we proved with this printer, it already gives me the serial number, right? Let's say this page was actually locked, right? We need to do some more advanced ways, advanced concepts of trying to get into this system, right? So one of the ways that Rapid7 figured this out is through some directory traversing, and they noticed that the etc directory is called here. I don't know if you can see this if it's too small,
Yeah.
but it's pushing into the etc directory when it's checking for the password, right? Well, some of the things that they did with the test was they tried to see if they can get into the directory anywhere, right? And one of the things that they found that was able to get out was this MNT info. So if we go here and here, this MNT info is actually a like template document for all the printers that are connected, and it gives all the information like the serial number and all that information, right? Some enterprise printers, when you go to this, will just spit out all the information, more so than just the serial number, but a lot of information, especially like the localized network and what's connected to. So we can try to manually go to this and see if it actually loads up. And we're going to see that this is actually locked down on my printer. Like, I cannot access this page because I have to log in, right? So now we're out of luck. We can't get the serial number this way. So let's switch over to the command line, right? And I highly recommend for a lot of beginners, get used to the command line. It is your friend.
Yes.
You need to understand a lot of the basic tools. And some of the basic tools, as you can remember in the, let me open this up back up here real quick. The CVE description was the affected service. So these are not all the affected services. These are the primary services. I will add, it was not just HTTP and HTTPS and the IPP port. It was also the PJL port, which is the printer ports. It's a different printer port over 9100, and also SNMP. So like we had like 5 or 6 different ports that this could be affected with, right? So, but we're going to test with just HTTP to see if we can do wget or curl. So let's go ahead and minimize this here real quick. So let's start with curl, right? So how do we use curl? So we can type in curl, right? And then we can try to do 192.168.50.82. Now, as you can see, it already is trying to complete my previous proof of concept that I've already done. But we're just going to do just the IP address and see what it gives us, right? It doesn't give us anything, right? So that just means that the website itself is not feeding back any response, right? So we can try wget. Wget should give us a file. All right, so we have a file and downloaded the index.html. So for those of you who are trying to understand how curl works and wget works, basically it's the same concept of what your browser does. Your browser gives a get response, and then if the server is going to respond, it's going to give you a post request, right? So in this case, with wget, it will copy literally the index, which is right here, right?
Yep.
So we know that from previous attempts that we can get the maintenance information, right? Let's say you didn't have access to the browser, or there was some type of restriction for the browser going into a printer's admin page, right? There are proxies that exist in companies that will block this, right? So only admins can access it, and regular users can't. However, sometimes some things that they forget is to block the commands, right? So let's do wget. I'm gonna paste it here and see if it gives us something else, right? And lo and behold, we have the serial number because it just downloads it for us. That is one way to bypass proxies. I'm not saying this is what you should do on your own time or at the company, but it is a known security assessment that should be done, especially by your incident response guys. You guys should be aware that people can try to find a way around your security tools, and you have to be aware of those abilities and be able to either log it or suppress it. So let's go ahead and go to different something else. So let's see if curl actually works. I think curl actually does work. And we're going to kind of like shortcut this a little bit. So I already know that this works, but I just need the serial number, right? So I'm just
Yep.
going to hit enter here. And with curl, it doesn't download a file. It just spits it out onto the terminal. And with this, it just spits out the whole HTML side here. But to specify where the serial number is, I can just grep serial because I know it's going to say serial, and it's right here. And we have the serial number. So that's another way we can get the serial number. Let's say both these don't work, right? During the initial assessment, they were trying to get that MNT info, right? So let me show you what happens when we try to get the MNT info. Because on my printer, it's actually blocked without the admin password being put in. So if I do a wget, it will download something, right? So if I open this up, we're going to see there's a bunch of information on here, right? But I'm going to point out, let's see here. There's somewhere where it says I have to log in. I think it's all the way on the bottom here. Because we could do here, we could try to
Oh,
do
I
a
saw it. Go
search.
back. Go back. Bottom. So go up to the far right. Or right there. Log in. It's asking like that. Please log in. Number 32.
Yeah, there he is. Yep.
Yep.
So it says please log in. So even though we could try to use wget, it's not always going to be a perfect scenario. And even with curl, we can try curl as well. Let me do. I just paste this one more time. It doesn't give anything. So we have an issue where let's say wget and curl don't work. Well, let's move on to different ports, right? So one of my favorites is SNMP because SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol, for all you beginners, I highly recommend researching it because it is a critical vulnerability that we still have to this day. Even though we have version 3 now, which is way more secure, a lot of people still use version 2C, which is I wouldn't say very vulnerable, but it's a problem. It's a big problem because a lot of devices auto enable it, and SNMP allows communications with just a public community string, and I'll show you how that works. So with Kali, we have something called SNMPwalk, right? And you can see the completion of my command here, right? So we're going to do version -v 2c, which is the most vulnerable community version, right? And we're going to say -c, which is the community string. I'm going to say public, right? Let's go ahead and put in the printer because unfortunately, actually, I think most, if not all printers have SNMP enabled by default. Let's going to see what spits out, right? That's a whole lot of information, right? what does this all mean, right? So SNMP uses something called ISO, and I don't want to get too deep into it, to kind of display strings and formatting, right? So anything and everything related to the printer for a simple network management protocol. So if you have like a centralized server that's monitoring all your printers, it utilizes the ISO standard to figure out what's going on with the printer. And a lot of these have like ones, which usually are like null or defaults. Some of them will like, hey, look, this is how it prints, right? Like it has, these are the options to print. So like when you utilize a print server, the print server is going to retrieve this, say, hey, what can you do? How can you print, right? So we just keep going up. We can say like, oh, look, it does, uses a black toner cartridge. There's a lot of information it just spits out. It tells me what it is. It tells me how, how it prints out. And if we keep scrolling, we have a string here. Now we already know what the serial number is, but this, even if you didn't know, this is kind of like a stick out, right? And you can see what this ISO is, right? So this ISO generally is what is actually, I think it's like right here is where it stops. Generally, this ISO right here is where they store strings related to the printer. It could be passwords, like especially on some very unsecured devices, passwords will be in here sometimes. Strings for serial numbers, Wi-Fi passwords will sometimes be in here. So I highly, highly, highly recommend if you're playing around with SNMP and trying to secure devices using SNMP. This is a great tool to play around with to see what it actually spits out from a device. But we have the serial number here, and this is where you get it. You can also shorten it by just specifically telling it the ISO that you want to use. So when you do the command here, you have the SNMPwalk, the version, which is 2C, you have the community string, which is public, and then the targets, right, which is the IP address. Afterwards, is you could put the ISO if you know what the ISO is, and it'll just feed you the correct ISO. So since I know that's where the serial number is, it tells me what the serial number is. So we're good
Nice.
to go.
A fun little fact.
Yeah. We'll try one more quick thing, which is one of my favorite tools of all time, Netcat.
Netcat.
If you don't know Netcat, I highly recommend you understand Netcat. So in order to use Netcat, in this instance, we need to kind of print out something that the PJL network, which is, I forgot exactly what PJL stands for. I think it's a printer.
PJL?
Yeah, I think it's printer
Printer,
job
printer job
language.
language. Yep.
Yeah, that's what it is. So printer job language is another version of IPP. So you have Internet Print Protocol, and then you have PJL. I think there's two more. So there's a lot of printing languages. That's just how printers and computers talk to each other to print correctly. So we need to be able to submit something in a format that the PJL is going to accept. So in this case, we're going to use printf, which is basically just going to print a string out for us, right? And we're going to use the at PJL. So what this is going to tell the printer is that, hey, you're going to interpret this into the PJL formats, right? So what I need from it is I need info br firmware. So what this means is that I'm telling the printer, give me info based off your firmware. In this case, it's Brothers firmware. So in other printers, it might not be BR firmware, it might be something else. It's again, do your proper Google dorking, find it. It is publicly available. So we're gonna go ahead and do this, right? And then we're gonna feed it to Netcat, right? So basically what all this is gonna do is that this string is gonna be fed to Netcat, and Netcat's going to push it to the printer. So let's go ahead and do here, and we're going to do 50.82, and then PGL is typically on 9100. Sometimes those ports might be different. It is your job as a security researcher to properly enumerate which ports are listening to what. Sometimes it might be different. So, but in this case, it's default. I haven't changed it. So let's go ahead, enter.
Yeah, and I'll emphasize the importance of knowing your ports because yeah, just like you said, like maybe it defaults at 9100, but if your organizations change that, um, which some organizations probably I would probably say don't, but let's say your organization's productive, like you know what, we're gonna change it to a different port and we're gonna make it uh, 10,002. Like
Yeah.
that's why it's just important to know that because if you're gonna try this and it doesn't work, it could just be likely you're looking at the wrong port.
Yep, exactly. So, and we see here that it was successful. It gave me a bunch of information, which specifically I want, which is the serial number. So that is 4 or 5 different ways you can retrieve the serial number. So you might be asking now, okay, so what? So what do we do with this? Well, we're going to use Metasploit to take advantage of it. So remember what I said, that an unauthenticated attacker can have access to the device's serial number. They can get the device's password. Well, how does that work, right? I don't want to get too much into the math, but the way Brother does it,
Math.
math, there's a lot of math involved. And luckily, as a security researcher and incident response, as a person coming into cybersecurity, you don't need to know that much math, right? I took calculus. I don't use calculus. Like, like
Bless your heart.
uh, unless you want to get into that thing, there's always already something going on. So
Well, I'm going to reiterate GitHub, everybody. If you've never messed around or gone through GitHub or read through repositories, um, be aware of it. Know how to search and go through GitHub because there is amazing repositories of work that's been completed, proof of concepts, walkthroughs and step by steps of how this is going to exactly what me and Jason are about to walk through with you guys on a lot of the stuff that if as long as it's been researched already, you'll be able to find other write ups and stuff. And ideally, everyone. So disclaimer: not every repository you find in GitHub is a golden goose. Sometimes there's some bad ones, and sometimes there's also some malicious ones. So as once again as a security practitioner and being part of a cyber organization and taking care of your organization, do your due diligence and don't just copy and paste a code out of GitHub, please, into your environment. Please, please don't do that. Continue,
do,
please.
do your proper research, please. For now, we can see that this is Rapid7's GitHub repository, so we're mostly in the clear. But yeah,
So
always
yeah, mostly
verify.
legitimate. Yeah, Rapid7, like I said,
Mostly.
does a pretty solid job.
They do a pretty solid job. So they developed this module, right? So this module is written in Ruby. It is one of the up and coming, I should say up and coming. It's used pretty well now. It's a very popular language if you ever want to get into software development. If you want to get past the basics like Python, I highly recommend looking to Ruby. Ruby's pretty cool. It works pretty well, especially when it comes to Metasploit. So this is written in Ruby. So real quickly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of scroll down here a little bit, right, to this stuff right here. So we have a salt lookup table and we have a salt data table. Long story short, what this means is that Brother and Rapid7 were able to enumerate a salt table that is used in conjunction with the serial number to generate a device's password. This is how the device's default password is generated for each device. So basically, when you salt something, you're basically making a new hash out of it. When it comes to different device serial numbers, the serial numbers are always going to be different, right? So that means the password's always going to be different. And it's not going to be like, hey, like my serial number is 12345 and my password's 6789110, and then your serial number is 12346, and so that means your password's 6789111. That's not how it works. It'll be
Yeah.
completely random and completely different, right? So this was a good concept in theory, right? Until it was found out like, oh, you can just repeat the process with some Google searching, right? Like, don't get me wrong, like, yeah, this is available to us now. It's a nice little pretty lookup table. It's in a module, but this was, I shouldn't say easily findable, but it was findable. Pretty well concept that an attacker could find on their own if it wasn't for a security researcher to develop this and show a proof of concept, right? So it uses these tables, combines them with the serial number of the device, and it makes a password. So luckily for us, we don't have to do this function, right? It's already
Whew.
defined for us in a pretty little Ruby package, right? So what I have done already, right, is I've already downloaded the Ruby package. So if you go into my downloads, actually,
Now, would you mind, Jason? Not to interrupt you, but would you just mind, like, let's say, and I don't know if you plan on showing it, but let's say you didn't download the package. Could you just go over what it looks like to download a repository from GitHub if you had to download it or pull it?
sure. A couple ways you could do it is you could just download the raw file this way. so, so
That's the easy way, Jason. I meant the cool way in Cali. No,
So in Kali, there's a couple ways you can do it. One of the ways we could possibly do it here is I can just we can use Git right now. I didn't use Git at
yeah, you,
all.
you don't have to demonstrate it. I didn't know if you pulled it with Get or if you just downloaded it by clicking on the link.
So
So,
one of the other ways is you can use curl. So you can see my command completion here is that I was able to get into the repository and copy it that way. But the simplest way to get started, right, is just to download the raw file, and that comes to your downloads.
boo, the boring way, Jason. That's not cyber. No, I'm kidding.
It's a shortcut, so I can do my proof of concept faster. But anyways possible, just verify that the file's correct, obviously. The chosen way is to use Git, or in this case, if you weren't using Kali and you were using MSF console installed from Metasploit, what you can do is you could subscribe to the bleeding edge version of it. I can't demonstrate that on Kali because Kali has it embedded in the operating system itself. So there's different ways to do it. You could do I think it's like Kali tweaks. I think it is. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, so you can do it through here through meta packages. You can subscribe to uh, the bleeding edge packages. That's one way you can do this. And I already have it on here, I think, somewhere around here. Let's see
That's
here.
actually cool. I did not know you could do that. That's actually kind of
Yeah,
neat.
I highly recommend if you want to use Kali to its full advantage. Look into Kali tweaks. There's a couple other tools you can do to make it more of your play style, so to speak, right?
Nice.
But anyways, so the other way to install it too. So if you are downloading a module that may not be on the bleeding edge, it may not be in the main MSF console that you're using, right? You have to install it manually. Well, every uh, home device has, when you install Metasploit, every user is going to have something inside their home drive right here called .msf4, which is the installation directory where you can install your custom modules. Because not everybody is using the same modules for everybody. A lot of security researchers will develop their own modules, right? And they want to use them in Metasploit, see if they actually work. That's how Metasploit grows. Is people donate to the community their modules and how they take advantage of this stuff, right? So you need to have that directory installed on your Kali Linux box. Luckily, mine's already created, and you need to place the module sort of correctly in the same way MSF console actually works. And what I mean by that is I'm going to go ahead and do another terminal, and we're just going to go ahead and launch MSF console. We're going to watch the pretty stuff come in. One of my favorite things is the artwork every time you start up with
Yeah,
it.
which artwork will generate?
It
You got a
generates a duck
goose.
at the time,
That's
or
a
a goose, yeah.
goose. Ducks don't honk.
So if we wanted to use a module, right? So we can use, you can also do info, right? So let's say like I want to do some research, right? So like do auxiliary, right? And you can show the 1,300 possibilities in auxiliary, right? There's auxiliary admin, right? That's what I mean by the structure. Like you have to copy the structure that Metasploit reads. And if you don't have that, it's not going to read your module. And kind of the way that works, right, is if you go into here, MSF4, if I hit tab completion again, there's going to be an additional folder in here called modules, right? As soon as you have that, technically you can just drop the Ruby module or whatever language module into just modules, and then Metasploit will identify probably where it's supposed to be and place it. But you should probably um, do modules and then exploits and then into what it should be and be clean about it. So that way you know how to use your own modules, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, so if I go into exploits, I think I have it in here. It might be in my MISC. There it is. So I've already pushed this into my MISC folder. If I want to try to find this and make sure it's actually loaded in here, I can do an info here. Once you install modules, though, you need to reload MSF console. It will not recognize it until it reloads all the stuff. So we're going to go ahead and do that real quick. And it's telling me some of the modules are not working as indicated. That's all right, because the module we're using is not related to this. We'll wait for it to complete here. It does take some time depending on how many modules you have.
While we wait, Jason, what made you want to get into cyber?
Uh, there
Oh,
was
we're already sorry. Anyway, I'm kidding.
That's a good question. I guess what kind of really drove me to cyber is seeing that there is, abuse for technology. We design and innovate technology for use, but we always think of security last, and that is always a afterthought until it's heavily needed. And so we need experts into it. And it's great playing around with this and tinkering. I mean, that's where the original terminology of hacker comes from, is tinkering around, see what it does, what it can do, what it's not supposed to do. And that's where this comes into. This is where I have the most fun, is being able to play around, see that this is a problem, and then develop solutions for it as we can. Sometimes I don't have solutions, but like, hey, look, this is a problem, right? And you don't have to have an answer for everything. It's more of just, you just need to know where to start, and then you can collaborate with your team to develop it. So
Exactly. Awesome.
anyway, so
Cool.
we're gonna go ahead and use this module, if that's okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Sorry, we're gonna use.
Let's hack a printer, baby. Hoodies
Let's
up,
hack a printer.
everybody. Hoodies
All right.
up.
We're going to use Ox. I placed it in admin, I think, and then misc. And it's not there. Let's see if we can find it here real quick. Let's do here. So we got to find this. There it is. All right. So I've created its own folder called misc, and it's got the bypass on there. So 51978, always verify that you're using the same CVE, which I am. We're gonna go ahead and do info real quick. So this is what it's using, is something that we've already used in Netcats, which is the PJL port, right? So it's going to communicate with the printer over PJL. All right, let's go ahead and actually use this. All right, and then we can do info again, see what it needs. So it's required this information, and if you don't know how to read a Metasploit information page and how to use it correctly, you have your basic options here. And sometimes I'll have advanced options, sometimes I'll have more information for you. But we're looking at what is required, right? So we have a yes here and a yes here, right? So we need a community string, which is already provided for us. So current settings will show you if it's in it or not, like if it's been predefined. In this case, most of the stuff has been predefined for us, which makes it very, very easy for us. Other modules are not this easy. Sometimes you have to fill in this information yourself. It's already got the port. Proxies, this is just in case if you have to proxy off something if you're in a different network. We don't have to worry about that on my network. It's got retries, and then we see a blank one right here that's required, right? Our host. So that's basically saying, what is the target? What are we targeting, right? Everything else is filled in for us. We don't have to worry about it. So the only thing we have to provide it is our host. So we're going to say set our host to the IP address of the printer, right? And then we're going to say exploit. And look at that. It generated a password for us. Let's see if this is the correct password real quick. Go back in here. Log in, please. Hey, I'm admin now. As you can see, there's a bunch of other stuff I can do in here. And I can even change the password. Change me. And it took it. So, but now that I changed the password, here's the proof that we don't have to worry about it if the default device password doesn't work. All right. So it says successfully validated the administrator password. So it does have inside its own module that it will test to see if this works. Let's run it again to see if this is actually going to give us a different message. Bam, it failed. So luckily with this proof of concept, I was able to provide that yes, it works if the default password hasn't been changed. And then I can prove to my researching team, hey, look, if we change the device password, we don't have to worry about it.
That's
It's
still
no
kind of
big deal.
cool, though, that it shows the admin password from the previous change, though. So it doesn't show the new one, but it still shows, like, is that still the old password, right? The
Yep.
less than.
So
Okay, cool.
this is based off the math that I showed that's in the
Those,
Ruby
the
module.
salt tables, or the
Yeah.
tables we saw.
This is generated from that table based off this serial number. So that's how it gets that password. That's why it's going to generate the same password over and over again for this same serial number. If the serial number was different, the password would be different. It's just the default password. And a lot of people might ask, like, well, does everybody change the default device password? And the answer is 80% no.
No.
No, they don't. No, they do not. A lot of times it's usually just installed and just push through
Yeah.
for use. So
You tell me, like, all right, so you go buy your grandma and grandpa a new printer, a brother printer. You think your grandparents or you're going to go in there and change the password? No. The answer is no. So
So that's why you always want to verify this stuff. But it was great to play around with this, and it's great to know that for one, the attacker has to be on the local network, and then two, if the default passwords are changed, then we don't really have to worry about it. It is an unpatchable vulnerability, but is a vulnerability that has different ways to be mitigated, which is where defense in depth comes into play.
awesome. Well, Jason, this has been fantastic. And hopefully, everyone on the channel today learned a little bit more. I think we should be seeing a little bit more of Jason later this week. I think I'm going to break this video into 2 segments. This was an awesome hands on kind of breakdown for doing incident response in the sense of finding a CVE, doing the open research, showing the proof of concept, and then actually going to actually do said proof of concept, which was an amazing and a great walkthrough hands-on, Jason. So thank you so much. And everyone on the channel, if you enjoyed this, please like, please comment, please subscribe, and ask us what we should show you next. Maybe I can keep Buck and Jason to hop on this channel and we can do some awesome other cool an exploit series on CVEs you should be aware of. So, but hey, everybody, thank you so much for sticking around. Jason, thank you so much for coming on, and we will see you on the next video.